Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on the customer loyalty program data utilization. I'm Erin Reese. I am here with Annex Cloud. I lead the go-to-market teams, and I'm sitting here today with Richard Schenker, who is with Loyalty Strategy Consultants. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you.
Richard, would you like to give a little background on yourself and your loyalty experience?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks very much, Erin. And first and foremost, thank you very much to Erin and the team at Annex Cloud for making this opportunity available. I'm hoping that you enjoy the session. So I thought I'd start by telling you a bit about myself. I'm the founder and chief customer engagement officer of Loyal Strategy Consulting. I provided strategic counsel and loyalty counsel to various different brands across a lot of different sectors. You can see what I affectionately refer to as my NASCAR slide of brands that I've had the opportunity to work with. I started my career on the client side, working for the Hudson's Bay Company, developing their first loyalty program and managing their credit card portfolio. And then spent time with Shoppers Drug Mart, which is the largest chain drugstore in Canada, building their loyalty program and managing their financial services. Later on in my career, I moved over to the agency side, worked for Loyalty One, owner operator of their Miles Reward program, and then Bond Brand Loyalty, where I was the managing director of the loyalty consulting practice. Glad to be here today and glad to talk to you about my experience across various different sectors.
Great. Thanks, Richard. Before you dive right into the presentation, a couple housekeeping items. There's a lot of folks here that are on the line, which is terrific. Thank you for joining us. We would love for this to be interactive. I've gone through this with Richard. There's a lot here. And I've found that if questions come up, you may want to ask them right away, which is perfectly fine. So feel free to raise your hand and or put a question in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that as we go, and we'll interrupt Richard as we go, so he can fill us in and keep us knowledgeable about what he's talking about.
That's great, Erin. Thank you. And I don't mind the interruptions whatsoever. The one caveat is because I'm on screen share, I can't see any of the folks. So Erin will, I'm sure, prompt me as you have questions. So please don't hesitate. Thanks, Erin. In terms of the session agenda, we're going to just start off by reviewing some of the foundational data sources from a loyalty perspective. We're going to drill down on a case study around decile loyalty data utilization to really give you a rich understanding of how you should be using deciles, regardless of the business sector that you're in. We'll spend some time talking about segment personas and how you leverage data to make better informed business decisions. And the topic that I'm most passionate about is what I call enterprise-wide data utilization. We're going to actually give you some examples of how you can use loyalty beyond just selling more merchandise to customers. There's so many different applications across an enterprise or an organization where data can be used to make better business decisions. And we're going to share some of the secret sauce with you on how you can best do that. And of course, Q&A, formal Q&A, but as Erin said, feel free to prompt us when you do have questions and we'll do a bit of a wrap up. Okay, makes sense for everyone? Great, excellent. Okay, so when we think about loyalty programs, I think most of you know this, but I just want to make sure we're covering some of the bases here. There really are four different sort of territorial areas where we can start to collect data. Zero-party data, just for those of you who are not as familiar, that is really voluntary data that your customers are providing you with or your loyalty members are providing you with. It may be preferences, attitudes, behaviors, demographic information, that sort of thing. First-party data is the transactional and pure behavioral data that you're collecting in terms of frequency and spend and margin and types of products your customers are buying, how they're interacting with you socially. So those are more transactional in nature. Second-party data is actually the same as first-party data, but it's not your data. You may have, let's say, a transactional partnership with a co-branded credit card, or you may have a transactional partnership with a partner within your loyalty program. That is their first-party data. Again, their transactional data that they might be sharing with you so that you have a more sort of holistic 360 view of your common customer. And last but not least, third-party data. So third-party data is pure external data. So that could be census data, that could be, let's say, credit bureau data, more aggregated data that you can use in a way that provides you with a richer view of your customer cohorts. Okay, makes sense? Okay, so let's get right into it. This is an area I'm excited to talk about, and hopefully you're interested as well, is decile loyalty data utilization. What we're going to do today is we're going to really use a retail illustration. So this is a specialty retailer. By the way, if you figured out who the retailer is from the picture, it's not them. I just use this to disguise the data, disguise the retailer, and protect the innocent. But it is a specialty retailer. So in its simplest terms, let me orient you to what loyalty decile data is. So there are a lot of numbers on here. There are a lot of fields on here. There could be a lot more. We just tried to make this really simple. What deciles effectively are is we're taking your entire customer base and we're breaking them down by spend into every 1/10. So your number one decile are your customers who spend the most with you. So in this particular case, the average annual spend is $1,252. Your next decile spends $476. And you can see the numbers start to go down and down. So we're basically taking a 10th slice of every single customer across your entire member base. So in this particular case, there are approximately 13 million members. So we have 1.3 million in each one of these deciles. Okay. So there are a number of fields on here that I'd like to orient you to. One is, as we talked about, the average annual spend, the annual frequency, the spend per transaction. We could have had maybe the percent margin. We could have had the percent penetration of private label. There's so many other fields that we can break these deciles down by. And then as you see at the bottom here, the percent of member oncers are customers who only frequent this particular business one time per year. And that's really important to understand what proportion of members, because you want to try to bring customers in more than one time per year if you've invested the money and getting them to engage in your loyalty program. This loyalty program also has a tier distribution. So there's a top tier, there's a mid tier, and the bottom tier. And you can see in the illustration here that the top tier is basically cut right in the middle of decile 1. So your very best customers make up the top 10%. So let's call it the top 5% of the membership base. Then from there, you can see that your mid tier, which is probably that next 5% all the way down to halfway through the second tier. And then you can see the bottom tier is everyone else. And what's interesting is that top tier spends $1,252 per year, whereas the mid tier on average spends $476 per year. And then you can see the rest, who are in the bottom tier, spend significantly less. So this is a really good snapshot to really understand the distribution of your customers. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you how you can actually utilize this to make better informed business decisions. Before I move on, are there any questions about the orientation of this loyalty decile? No? Okay. Makes sense? Great.
Oh, and to
Okay.
clarify for everybody, I'm sorry, Richard. I thought it was the chat. There's a Q&A section that you can ask questions, and we will be monitoring that in case you have any as we go. Thank you.
Excellent. So the first thing that pops out is that 54% of the spend comes from that top cohort, that top 10% of customers. That is a really important number, because what you want to be able to do is you want to be in a position to defend and retain those customers. And what we derived out of the analysis here is that for every 1% of attrition from decile 1, there's a risk of $16.3 million in sales loss. So as a retailer, this retailer would really want to make sure that they're not seeing attrition out of this business, out of this particular decile, because these customers are ardent customers. They spend a lot of money with the brand. And even a 1% attrition could be detrimental to the business. Similarly, for every 1% movement from decile 2 to decile 1, that's worth about $10 million in sales. So I think what's interesting here is when you're making decisions how to invest against these deciles, you want to look at where is the biggest opportunity for upside financial gain. And what it appears to be is if we can move just 1% of decile 2 to decile 1, that's worth 10 million in sales. If we move 2%, that's 20 million, and so on. You can do the math. You can see the differential between the average spend of 476 versus 1,252. The frequency basically doubles. The spend per transaction almost doubles. So these are important metrics to really understand. That's why deciles are super, super important, because it allows you to make better informed decisions as to how you're going to use your scarce marketing campaign dollars. And then similarly, as we go down the decile lever here, if we were to move just 1% of decile 3 to decile 2, that's worth $3.6 million. Now, that's nothing to sneeze at. It's not the 10 million that we saw, but it's also something that should be considered. Again, it gives you a guideline as to where you should make your investments. And then as we move down the continuum, we can see there's less upside when you start to move people up from decile 6 to decile 5 to decile 4. There's still upside, but there's not as much upside there. So again, thinking about those scarce resources and where you want to really make those strategic financial investments, this is a really good tool to help you do that. And then last but not least, thinking about those one-serves.
Richard?
Yes.
Sorry, there have been some questions I found now.
Sure.
One of them is, do you also, hold on, let me make sure there wasn't a question before that. No, I think so. Do you also consider competitive spend in the average annual spend?
Competitive spend is not in here. We're actually going to talk about that in the segment personas, but I think it's important to understand what share of wallet that you have, because if somebody's giving you the maximum share of wallet, it doesn't matter what you're going to do, you're not going to get more out of them. So I think that's a really good point, that you can actually overlay that data if you do have that data. And was there a second question?
Not that I'm seeing.
Okay.
Yep. I think we're good.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. And then again, in terms of the one-sers, where do we want to make investments against those one-sers to try to get that frequency up? So you can see from decile 3 to decile 7, decile 7, you're getting 46% of customers who are one-sers. So there's an opportunity to get higher frequency there. Now, are we going to go to decile 10? Probably not, because those are probably people who just joined the program, are either dissatisfied with the brand or have moved on. So you have to pick your sweet spot in terms of where you think you're going to get your bang for your buck. So again, if we invest against deciles 3 to 7, that's worth just under $2 million for every 1% that you can get to make an additional transaction during the year. So let's do a bit of a summary on what we saw. Retain top decile 1 is really a prioritization wheel. There's about $16.3 million for every 1%. Some of the approaches you might take would be a surprise and delight recognition campaign or puts for potential decliners as you're seeing attrition. Maybe you reach out to those customers. For the migration of a portion of decile 2 to decile 1, we know that's worth about $10 million for every 1% you move up. Maybe it's a frequency-based continuity offer that you make to those customers to try to get them to spend more frequently and move them up the value chain. Migrating a portion of decile 3 to decile 2, again, that's worth about $3.6 million for every 1%. Maybe it's a frequency, maybe it's a spend stimulation campaign to really try to get them to increase their spend or frequency to move them up the food chain. And then similarly with the increased transaction frequency of decile 4 to decile 6, maybe it's a frequency-based or time-limited campaign to try to move them up those cells. And last but not least, those one and dones that we talked about, decile 3 to 7, Maybe it's a time-based spend stimulation campaign offer to get them to make a second transaction with the brand. Okay. Any questions about this before we move on to personas? Okay.
One second, Richard. There was a question, and for some reason, I can't see it. Alicia, I know you were texting me. Can you see it and can you give us context?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It says unknown user, so I'm not sure whom in the webinar was asking the question. Maybe they can raise their hand and then they can give some more context to their question. But they were asking, this is based on what is it in the top versus bottom. So if you were the one who asked the question, if you could raise your hand and then we can get some more context to your question. Okay, Suzanne. Okay, let me go ahead and allow your mic if you want to ask your question.
I'm not hearing her. Is she?
Perhaps, Suzanne, if we can hear you, if you can just add some context to your question, and we can circle back to it.
So this is Scott. Her question initially was about splitting into the 10 groups, and she wanted to know if it was by spend or what was the loyalty metric to formulate the deciles.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. This particular one was done by spend. It was actually the average spend. There are other ways that you can break the deciles down depending on what the business need is. Some businesses may want to break it down by gross margin dollars, as an example, or gross margin dollar contribution, or maybe frequency. But typically, spend is a pretty good barometer to break down the decile. So there is flexibility.
And to confirm, when you say spend, you mean average spend on an
Yes,
annual basis.
average annual spend, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to get into segment personas and data application. And again, to protect the innocent, this is not the grocer, if you figured out who this grocer was, but I like using a grocery example because there's a lot of richness around segment personas and data applications. This is work that I did several years ago for a large grocer in the US. And effectively what we did was, the notion here was, you are what you eat. And what's interesting about this category is we can really identify the composition of the customer personas based on leveraging SKU level data to build personas. This will come a little bit clearer very soon when I give you some of the examples, but we actually use the SKU level data, the things that you buy, the things that you eat and your family eats, to really understand what type of customer you actually are. So in this particular case, we use zero-party data, first-party data, and to a certain extent, second-party data to really derive these personas. So I'll introduce you to these 5 personas. We'll go into each one of them in a fair amount of detail and give you an opportunity to ask any questions. So in this particular case, the 5 included Tanya, who's very time-starved. We had Lori, who's price insensitive. She is really not interested in savings. Ray, who is health obsessed. And of course, we could really identify that he's health obsessed based on the types of products that he buys at the grocery store. And then, of course, there's Julie, who's price sensitive because we can see the proportionality of things that she buys at regular price versus off price. And then Anne, who's a scratch cooker, because we can see that she buys a lot of ingredients for cooking and baking. So let's dive into Tanya, who's time starved. Just to orient you to some of the statistics here, we have age and gender. So the ones that are in green are for the specific cohort. The ones that are in black are the average statistics for all customers or all members of the loyalty program. We have the grocery share, so the number of stores, and we got that through credit card data because we can see that these cohorts are shopping using their credit card at other grocery stores. It's not perfect because, of course, if you go to Walmart, it's hard to tell what you're buying at Walmart, but I think it's relatively precise. Program tenure, average basket, average units per transaction, the annual frequency of the customer, the annual spend, the percentage of off-price purchases, the percentage of private labels, in this particular case, the grocery's own brand, the percentage that were 3-month active, what are the top 3 categories that the customer is purchasing in, and what proportion of the base of customers do they represent. So let me introduce you to Tanya's time starve. Her narrative is, I'm always on the go. I have a demanding corporate role and a young family. I only have time to stop into the store on the way home from the office. When I'm in the store, I pick up prepared foods. I often use home delivery to order my main food orders and household staples. I value getting in and out of the store quickly and the convenience of delivery to home. So what are some of the key observations? What we do know about Tanya and people like Tanya is that she really is a promiscuous grocery shopper. And I mean that in the sense that it's driven by convenience. The average grocery shopper goes to 2.5 locations. She goes to 3. So she goes where it's most easiest for her to get in and out of the store. We also know her average spend is lower than the base average, suggesting she has more convenient and filler trips and less of the big planned grocery trips, which are very important to grocery store because that's where the volume is. We know that she has low off price, so she's less sensitive to price sensitivity. We know that she's not buying a lot of private label products, and we know there's an opportunity to expand her category mix. So what are some of the things that we would want to do with cohorts like Tanya? We'd want to introduce her to convenience features to mitigate her grocery share splitting. We'd want to provide her incentives to get more of her big planned trip because that adds volume spend. We probably also want to serve up some digital and rapid meal solutions. So maybe automated private label meal counter solutions, and expand her purchase mix into frozen foods, which we see she is not buying. And that could be a good quick meal solution for her. So she represents about 23% of the base of customers. So it's nothing to sneeze at. This is a group that we want to pay attention to. Any questions about Tanya before we move on to the next cohort? Okay, let me introduce you to price-sensitive Julie. So her narrative is, I'm always looking for deals. I rarely buy items at full price. I use my app to redeem offers. I like to stock up on items when they're on sale. I go to the grocer with the lowest prices and often shop up to 4 grocery chains, depending on what product I'm buying. I have a big family and saving money helps us stretch our dollars. What Julie probably doesn't realize is that she's probably spending more on gas running around to all these grocery stores, given the price of gas, to mitigate some of the savings. So let's talk about Julie a bit. She's loyal to the discount. She is not loyal to the grocery banner. She's what you would call a real promiscuous grocery shopper. Her frequency is above average, but her units per basket are lower than average, suggesting that she probably is cherry picker. She's picking off those items that are on sale, and she's not buying things that are off price. So Julie represents actually a large proportion of the cohort, about 35% of shoppers. So we do have to pay a lot of attention to the Julies of the world. Private label represents a significant portion of her shopping composition. And we know that she's not purchasing meat and deli, which we know for this particular shopper, because of the data analytics that were done, is essentially a key driver of the grocery relationship. So we need to keep that in mind in terms of how we communicate with her. So in terms of the opportunities, there's an opportunity to expand her purchase mix into additional center store categories, as well as stock up, because we see she's not buying those stock up items. She's likely shopping at Walmart for those categories. We should probably offer discounts on items conditional on her purchasing new categories. So perhaps we give her greater discounts on the things that she buys if we can move her into new categories to expand her share of wallet. Offer discounts on meat and deli because we know that's a key driver of the relationship. We know when people like her buy meat and deli, they tend to index more highly across other categories of this business. And that's something that we derived out of the data. There's also a need to mitigate her grocery store hopping and consolidate spend by providing her with the confidence that she's always getting the best value when she shops at this grocery chain. Make sense? Any questions about price sensitive Julie?
I do want to let you guys know as well that we did just enable you guys to unmute your microphones. So if you do have a question, feel free to unmute. But if you do not, please try and keep yourself on there to minimize background noise.
That's great. Thank you. Price insensitive Lori. Lori is total opposite of Joy. I live a busy life and I shop for groceries where I know I can get in and out of the store for a quicker filler trip. I look for a grocery store that is nearest to me and don't really worry about prices. I purchase the bulk of my groceries online and have them delivered to save me time. I don't have much time to make meals, so I appreciate anything the grocer has to offer to make shopping easy. Lori is a dream customer because she doesn't care about prices. Unfortunately, she only represents 13%, but let's not take that for granted because she represents a high revenue component and a high margin component. As we know, price discounts won't change her behavior. It's important to protect this high cohort. And even though they represent a small proportion of the file, it really is a large proportion of the margin dollars. So what are we going to do with the Loris of the world? This cohort is not in need of discounts, but rather recognition for their loyalty. So for Lori, we should be offering her services that are solutions which foster a more convenient and enhanced branded experience. Maybe it's something like an AI replenishment service inside of her app so that she can automatically things that she normally gets on automatic replenishment. Maybe it's an opportunity to introduce her to some of the private label products because we know that private label products keep customers sticky to the grocery relationship. And then there's Anne, who's a scratch cooker. You can tell by the picture, she's not very happy with us, but here's a bit of the narrative about Anne. I've been brought up to cook and bake using raw ingredients. This way I know what my family and I are eating. My recipes have come from generations before me, but I'm open to new ones too. I will spend lots of my time in the store looking for ingredients for baking and cooking. I wish there were more private label ingredients to save money and more ethnic ingredients. So this is an important cohort, even though it's 12%, but we want to make sure that we're addressing this cohort. There certainly is a high incidence of raw ingredients in her basket. That's how we knew to build this actual cohort. She's buying all baking supplies, raw ingredients. So this tells us a lot about who she is based on the types of products that she's buying. Similarly, the convenience customer, we know that the convenience customer was buying things like ready-to-go meals, bagged lettuce. That tells us a lot about the convenience customer too. Anne spends well above the average and has a high frequency, likely due to the fact of frequency of baking and cooking. She knows what she wants and is underrepresented in private label. She does not always find all the ingredients that she needs, especially ethnic ingredients. So what do we do about that? We think there's an opportunity for this grocer to expand the penetration of private label ingredients and merchandise private label ingredients to her. We also believe there's an opportunity to offer her baking solution recipes, content based on ethnicity, expand the assortment of ethnic ingredients to consolidate spend with this banner, and offer discounts on bulk ingredients, and expand her spend into stock-up items as this is not represented in her basket. Okay, so again, by diving into these cohorts, we start to learn more about these customer needs based on their shopping behaviors, and we can tailor a campaign directly to these customers as opposed to mass campaigns. And last but not least, Ray is health obsessed. Ray, I'm a triathlon runner and take good care of my body. I'm very conscious of what I eat. I only buy organics, minimize processed foods, sugar, salt, and red meats. I'm prepared to pay a premium for food that I know is good for me. I wish there would be more health-wise private label menu items at this grocer. He represents about 17%. This segment, as we can tell by what he buys, is focused on healthy eating and well-being. He's not price sensitive. He trusts national brands. While he's a small portion of the file, because he's high margin, we think there's a significant opportunity to attract more of these health seekers to the brand. The current mix of healthy and organic products is really underrepresented with this grocer. So there's an opportunity to increase the mix of organics and healthy product options. make it easier for Ray and his cohort to identify healthy food options. Maybe we start to codify foods on the labels with a healthy index on shelf, with a codified number, a codified symbol, so that he knows exactly where the healthier options are. Expand the breadth and depth of organic and healthy options, and introduce private label healthy options with incentives for him to try those products, and offer healthy option menu content solutions as well. So it's not about price here. It's about providing the right product, the right content when Ray needs it. Okay, before I move to enterprise-wide loyalty data utilization, any particular questions about personas and the utilization of personas? What I would say is, I've given you a grocery snapshot of personas. You can easily create these types of cohorts if you're in travel and hospitality or banking or credit card or CPG. These are all very applicable to any business sector that you're in. Grocery is an easy one to do it, but any questions about these personas before we move on to enterprise loyalty data utilization?
I've just got a question, if that's okay, Richard.
Sure.
Yeah, so how are you deriving those personas? Is it from the qualitative research sort of functions of the business, or are you using data science techniques on transactions, or both?
Yeah, good question. So it's a function of sort of three areas, primarily zero-party data and first-party data. So those personas, those details, those attitudes and behaviors were built on some research that we did on those cohorts. But most importantly, we went to first-party data. And the whole notion that I merchandised earlier was you are what you eat. So in the case of the price insensitive customer, we can see that customer is price insensitive because the proportion of purchases is very skewed to full price products. In the case of the convenience shopper, we can see the types of items in that convenience shopper's basket: bag lettuce, ready to go meal solution. That tells you a lot about the customer. Whereas Anne is a scratch cooker, she's not a ready to go time starved individual. She's somebody who is really interested in building her meal solutions from scratch. Now, having said that, there could be overlap in the segments too. You might be a scratch cooker, but you may also be time starved too. So we have to take it with a grain of salt. What I've showed you effectively is these cohorts in isolation, but there are certain incidents where some of these actually tend to overlap depending on location.
That makes sense. So when you've got like that percentage of base, it's price sensitive, like 35%, and then there was someone else that was a 17% of the base, you could have some customers in both. Is that what you're saying?
You could.
Yeah.
So it's not an exact number. I was just trying to illustrate this for ease of illustration today, but we effectively look at the SKU level data and build clusters around that to help identify who you are. There may be certain times of the year where you're time starved just because of personal circumstances, and other times of year where you're not time starved. It's really circumstantial.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. Enterprise-wide loyalty data utilization is a topic that I've actually written quite a bit about, and I want to share some of my thoughts about this because I'm hoping that you're all thinking about this. And if you're not thinking about it, you absolutely should be thinking about it. So traditionally, loyalty data has been used to make marketing decisions to get people to spend more, frequent more, maybe buy higher gross margin products, build avidity to the brand. Those are all really important reasons why you want to use loyalty data. But there are other applications. And again, I will go to a retail example, but this could have been as easily, let's say a banking example, where a bank has credit cards and mortgages and investments and insurance and other lines of business. But let's stick to the retail example here. As an example here, loyalty data should be used extensively from a merchandising and category management decisioning perspective. So things like promotional optimization. So typically, merchants will look at traditional metrics like unit movement, sales margin, total sales to assess the efficacy of a promotion. But now that we have loyalty data, yes, those are good metrics, but we should be using customer-centric metrics as well. So we should be understanding and dissecting the promotions to understand to which members did this program actually have a positive impact. Was it dilutionary to their spend, meaning that they would have already made that purchase already? Are we creating any forward buying habits? Are we actually getting companion sales? Sorry, did somebody want to say something? Sorry, I thought I heard a voice. Are we fostering the right types of behaviors so that we can fine tune these promotions in the future? I think about pricing optimization. A one price fits all strategy is probably not the right strategy in this day and age when you have loyalty data, because what a one price fit all strategy really leads to is margin erosion. We talked earlier about different types of customer segments. There's price sensitive segments, there's price insensitive segments, there's convenience segments. We really need to understand the key drivers of the relationship of that customer when we're building campaigns and promotions. And the typical example that I use is, and we've all been exposed to this, whether it's a grocery or a pharmacy chain, seeing case soda on sale on the front page of a flyer. That's great because it does drive store traffic into the store, but is it always profitable traffic? As a merchant, you may be looking at how many units of case soda did I move? How many sales did I move the needle on? Those are important metrics, but the merchant should also be looking at how much margin erosion did I create by this promotion? How many of my price insensitive customers actually picked up the case soda and would have paid full price? For those price sensitive customers, did I actually get them to buy something else in the store? Or did they just cherry pick soda, jam up the check lines, and walk out of the store and I lost $2 for every case of soda that I sold? So those are important things to understand. And that's why we believe using loyalty data to make better informed merchandising decisions and doing that on a more direct to consumer basis is going to create a much more effective type of promotion. Store layout is another one. And Aaron, I know you like this story. I've told this before to some of your clients, but I worked with a pharmacy chain several years ago. And one of the things that we derived out of the data was to really understand what the key drivers of the relationship was for their most valued customer. Their most valued customer was that female 25 to 37-year-old who had 2 children. And what we derived was that if we have the right product at the right price for 2 particular SKUs in that store, she will over-index across virtually every single category in the store. And it actually came down to 2 SKUs. It was shampoo and conditioner. So that nugget of information, that needle in the haystack that we found through the data allowed the merchant to actually change their entire merchandising strategy. So all of a sudden, they built out the most robust assortment of shampoo and conditioner of any retailer in the country. Secondly, they made sure that the positioning of that retail aisle was very close to when the customer came into the store, and they readjusted all of the adjacent categories that we know that customer index is higher on. So imagine 2 pieces of data really made a significant change in terms of how that store was laid out and the profitability of that franchise. Another example, which was groundbreaking, and again, this was with a grocer that I did work with several years ago, we identified really what the key driver of the relationship was for protecting that customer and keeping that customer loyal. And what we found was it was actually 1 SKU. It was premium ground beef. And we found that if customers were buying that premium ground beef at that particular retailer, they were indexing higher across virtually all categories of the store. So it was a key driver of the relationship. Unfortunately, what happened for that retailer, a number of Walmarts moved into their vicinity, and all of a sudden, Walmart was selling ground beef, albeit inferior, I hope there's nobody from Walmart on the call, to that particular ground beef by this grocer. So all of a sudden, what we started to witness was an attrition of those customers purchasing ground beef. But we weren't just losing the ground beef purchase, we were losing some of the associated purchasing in other categories, like stock up categories. So the data was actually telling us that story, and it was helping to inform the merchandising decision. So because we had a relationship with those customers, we actually reached out to those customers. We talked about the benefits of the premium ground beef versus the prepackaged beef that Walmart was selling with high sodium content, with shorter expiry dates, yada, yada. And we also created a promotional offer for ground beef. And what we found was that we were able to bring back a significant portion of those customers back to the grocer. And when they came back to the grocer to buy ground beef, they started to re-index across various different categories of the store. So again, a needle in the haystack around using loyalty data to make better informed merchandising decisions, not just loyalty marketing decisions. New product listings, really understanding your best customers and the new types of products that they're looking for is very important from a category management perspective. You may want to expand your private label assortment based on the types of national brand products that your best customers are buying so that you can drive them into higher margin purchases. And then similarly, delisting products. Often what happens is companies have to delist products because either they're being retired, there's less purchasing of those products, or there's a newer shade or a new type of product coming out. My wife's biggest pet peeve is when she has a lipstick that she loves, all of a sudden the lipstick company changes the shade or the formulation or whatever. Wouldn't it be great if you could identify if delisting a product is actually impacting your most highest value customers? Because if you delist that product, you may lose that customer coming to your location, or even better, as part of your loyalty program, if you have to delist that product, maybe you get a message out to your high value customers to say, hey, it's time to stock up on this product before this product gets retired. And customers will see that as a value added benefit. So again, some merchandising tactics that you may want to talk about. And similarly, this can be translated into banking, into credit cards, into hospitality, airlines, things that are being retired can definitely be appropriated to your high value customers. I'm going to move into operations and CX decisions. I know we only have about 10 minutes left, so I'll go through this rather quickly. But we talked about customized formats. A grocer may have various different types of retail banners, express banners, discount banners, traditional banners. Really understanding the composition of products and the experience that the customer is looking for is very important, and you can derive that through loyalty data. Also, optimizing service levels. Wouldn't it be great to know when your most highest value customers shop your stores? You may want to alter the component of part-time and full-time employees, because typically full-time employees are more engaged, they're more committed. So really understanding when your best customers are shopping your store will allow you to provide a better service level for those customers. Enhanced sales generation, using data for clienteling purposes, and then understanding the profitability by customer segment. Typically, operational folks within retailers look at sales, margin growth as really a metric around sort of operational growth. But what we should be also looking at is the profitability by customer segments, and operational teams should be essentially evaluated based on the extent to which they're bringing high value customers or high value customer segments to the particular territories or businesses. Last but not least, loyalty data can be used for real estate decisions. When you build a retail footprint, it costs a lot of money, and there are a lot of big decisions that are made to bring a retail footprint into fruition. Typically, when making a decision where to put a new store, you think about the existing population base, new housing starts, the competitive mix, cannibalization, the accessibility for customers, zoning laws, tax rates, and the pool of employees that would be able to work in the store. Those are all really important considerations when you're actually building a store and locating a store. But similarly, we should be looking at loyalty data, understanding the current and potential value of the segments within the trade area of that new store, understanding the customer's brand avidity and their CSAT scores, their attitudes, their preferences, and the potential cannibalization of segments with other nearby stores. So again, you can see there's a composite continuum of data that you can use to make better informed decisions from marketing, merchandising, ops, and real estate. Any questions about loyalty data utilization? Does this make sense?
Richard, it's near and dear to my heart. I love this. All the other ways you can use your loyalty data.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I think the one thing to keep in mind is this is actually a journey. This does not happen overnight. So if you've just built a loyalty program, or even if you've had a loyalty program for 5 or 6 years, it takes time to shift the mindset within the organization to use the data. But it's really important that you, as loyalty advocates, are advocating through the organization because you are investing significantly in loyalty and loyalty data. And it's important to harness the full sort of strength and utilization of the data across the enterprise. Otherwise, you're not maximizing the utility of your loyalty data. With that said, we can stop more formally for some question and answers. Before I do that, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Loyal Strategy Consulting. A few services that we offer here around Loyal Strategy Consulting are around loyalty strategy design and renovation, partnership curation. We can do health checks on loyalty programs. We help you with pilot strategies, customer experience management. We'll do facilitated ideation sessions, customer co-creation sessions, analytics and insight, and also help with CPG funded strategy. Just to pause for a moment for any questions that perhaps you didn't get an opportunity to ask.
Well, Richard, thank you very much for this. This is Scott. I work with Aaron. One of the things that I tend to love about presentations like this, when we're diving into the data, is because I usually see it as a chance to try things out. You mentioned several areas where we could apply this, but using this alongside a loyalty strategy, in addition to a loyalty data capture, allows you to, in a more safe environment, basically your family, your loyalty members, try things out in one particular area and test and learn from that. It seems like this kind of an approach allows you to not put all your eggs in one basket, but try things out in many different areas. Do you find that's the case, or do you see this as more of just a long-term data gathering strategy?
I would agree with you. I see this very much as a test and learn. It's an iterative process, just like when you build a loyalty program. Often we recommend that you pilot a program, you get the learnings, you understand the marketing efficacy, the operational challenges, the technical bugs and issues. So it's really important to do this in iterations. Quite frankly, you don't want to throw too much at your customers all at once, and you don't want to throw too much change within the organization at once. Taking the proper sort of methodical steps is definitely the right approach to go. There are certain companies out there, Tesco and Kroger, who have really implemented sort of enterprise loyalty in a very sort of demonstrative manner, but it took them many years to get there.
And then as a part of the data capture strategy, do you find that what was effective in creating these deciles was more of a look back approach, or how frequently do you refresh the data to see where a member may enter one decile and exit into another?
Yeah, it depends on the sector and specifically the frequency of the sector. If you're in a low frequency category, you probably don't have to refresh them as frequently. But in the case of grocery, I'd want to be doing that probably at least every quarter, refreshing and looking at migration strategies. As an adjunct to the deciles, I'll probably want to have some sort of migration view as well. So again, it's a function of the frequency of shop within the category.
And as we've been recording this, and hopefully we'll play this back for others, can you tell us a little bit about the time you spent to create these deciles? Because Again, if somebody wants to repeat your work for their industry or for their line of business, are they expecting a week's worth of work, a month? What should they put into it to get out what you
Yeah,
explained?
it's a good question, but it's hard to tell because it really is contingent on the organization of your data, how readily accessible the data is. If the data is easily accessible and you have the right tools, this can be done in something as simple as Excel if you can do the right extracts. So it really doesn't take long to actually build SL data as long as you have the right access to the right data and the right data dictionary and all those sort of key fundamentals.
There you go, Scott. Get after it.
It's already done. I did it while we were doing Q&A.
Terrific. Anybody, any other questions? Richard, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise. There's so much here that you covered in such a short period of time, but so valuable. Again, my favorite part is the other uses for loyalty data, as
Thank
we're all
you.
collecting so much of it. And yes, everybody, we will have a recording of this available. We will send it out to everybody who attended in case you'd like to reference it back. And please feel free to reach out to Richard. I know he's on LinkedIn and would love to connect with you too, if that's helpful.
That's great. Thank you very much, Aaron. And thanks again to Annex Cloud. And thank you everyone for joining today. I hope this was insightful for you and welcome any questions.
Yes, if
Thank
you have
you.
any follow-ups, please let us know and we will make sure to pass along and get all your answers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Have a great day.